Welcome to the Modise Network. President Cyril Ramaphosa has been on a drive to raise investment in the country in order to bolster the economy. There is no growth and the debt liabilities are growing, with the Treasury saying the country's debt burden is now 3 trillion and that will grow to 4.5 trillion in 3 years. The unemployment rate continues to grow, with the biggest effect being on the 54% of the youth. The Revenue Services has collected less than what is in the budget, and ratings agencies do not have a positive outlook for South Africa. What is wrong with Mzansi's economy and how do we fix it? The Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. David Masondo, will address the issues. But finances and the economy are not the only issues facing this nation. Water is emerging as a major crisis as citizens in some parts of the country go for days without water. Last year it was Cape Town. Recently, it is Giyani, Makhanda and Hammanskraal that are without water. Several researchers compiled a report warning about this looming crisis. I will chat to one of them later on. And we'll conclude the show with an interview on debt insurance and why it should matter to you. I'm now joined by the Deputy Minister of the Department of Finance, Dr. David Masondo, and I'm also inviting you to join our discussion on social media using the hashtag #TheModise Dr. Masondo, a pleasure to have you with us on the show. We appreciate your time.
No, thanks, Bratim.
The President has hosted the investment summit, and there's a talk about pledges, billions of rands being mentioned, over 300 billion. By the last time I checked. But what is coming out of the investment summit?
What is coming out is a commitment by the private sector to invest in the South African economy in order to grow it. And it's important for us to be on that drive, on the drive of attracting investment, particularly private investment in the economy, because without investment, there will be no jobs. Without investment, there will be no tax base for government to generate revenue, which is very important for us as government to continue to provide services to the people.
Well, it is important, but there's big money that's being spoken about, billions, hundreds of billions of rands, right? Mm-hmm. And with the high unemployment rate that we have in South Africa, it creates an impression that don't worry about the high unemployment rate, pledges are being made, this money is going to be invested, and jobs are going to be created. But it doesn't work that way.
No, definitely jobs are going to be retained. Jobs are going to be created. Investment simply means that people are putting money into the economy to buy equipment, and that equipment require people to operate them. Those investments include building infrastructure, and those infrastructures built by people. And through that, you are in a better position to basically create employment. Employment, it is going definitely to be created.
Are the pledges being met in any way by the government, making its own commitments, its own investments, where entrepreneurship can be grown?
IDC, for instance, they made a pledge of 20 billion of investment that they will be making in the next 12 months. Into our economy, and there are a number of institutions in government, SIFA, here in Gauteng, JAP, and many other in KZN, Itala, who are making a difference insofar as supporting small businesses. And one of the key pillars of the growth strategy that we've just released is National Treasury, which has become the government document. We're also focusing on breaking the barriers to entry for SMMEs, so that SMMEs, they come into the economy. And breaking these barriers, the traditional barriers range from skills, range from finance, infrastructure, as well as technology. So there are a number of government institutions and agencies that have been established, and they are playing a key role insofar as supporting SMMEs are concerned.
Well, some of the departments, ministries have been complaining that the Treasury Department is behaving like a super ministry, especially when it comes to the inclusive economy document. And I think even at provincial and, for that matter, municipal level, there are some of municipalities and provinces that do not seem to agree with you on how this economy needs to be transformed and made inclusive. How are you dealing with that? I'm not even going to the unions yet, because they've come out strongly and said, you as Treasury must be smoking your socks. You cannot just impose this document on everybody. They will not agree with many parts of it.
The document that we've just released is a product. Yes, we initiated it, but it has been discussed, debated within government itself. So we're not imposing. We work on the basis of consensus. We work on the basis of debates and discussions within government. And of course, we said that document should be discussed and debated by society as a whole. And as a result, with a second version of that strategy based on the inputs that we've received from society.
You're walking right and talking left. That on one hand, you come out with a document such as this one and you say, you know, the time requires that the government should act decisively, attract investment, and a whole number of interventions. But on the other hand, there's talk of expropriation without compensation. There's talk of capital being referred to as white monopoly capital. And then people sit back and say, which one is which from the South African government?
The discussion on the expropriation of land without compensation, it's a matter with Parliament now. And from the point of view of the ruling party, yes, I'm not here representing the ruling party, but I'm from the ruling party. But from the ruling party's point of view, we're not going to be doing a reckless expropriation of land without compensation. It's going to be under what conditions and circumstances would you expropriate land without compensation? If it's for in the public interest, if you want, for argument's sake, this land which we do not know who the owner is and that land has been lying fallow for years, you need to expropriate it without compensation so that no one after 10 years, after 15 years can come back and say, this is my land. And in that way, you're making sure that you have certainty insofar as property rights are concerned. So the way we'll approach it is not going to be a reckless expropriation of land without compensation. As to the character of business post-apartheid South Africa, for us it doesn't matter whether it's white, whether it's black. Of course, we do need transformation, but what is important for us is to make sure that business, black and white, we do invest in the economy in order to generate, whilst transforming the character of the racial character of business in this country, because that's one of our agenda as government, to make sure that our economy is de-racialized, women participate, black people participate, as well as the youth do participate in the economy. Because I think for us, investment is quite important. Whether it's Japanese investment, business, Chinese business, they do need to invest in our country whilst making sure that we transform the economy.
Now, can you make a case, Deputy Minister, for the talk about prescribed assets, that retirement funds and other funds should set aside certain amounts of money to be invested in the economy? And how do you do that in a situation where there is a so-called investment strike on the part of the big companies? I'm not sure if that has been proven yet. If ever you, as government or Treasury, are seeing an investment strike taking place in South Africa, because most of the pledges that we're talking about come from foreign companies in the main. First, is there an investment strike, you think, in South Africa? And is there need for prescribed assets?
The position of government is that the investment decisions must be left to the asset managers in order to make sure that they make investment that make good returns for the shareholders. And it's important for us to make sure that we allow the asset managers to basically take rational decisions insofar as investments are concerned, so that we don't, as government, prescribe investments that are not going to generate returns for the pension money that is that belongs to the workers. The investment strike, our task and our preoccupation now is how do we make sure that we lay the conducive environment for business to invest in our country. Our the discussion document that we've put together as National Treasury, we're focusing on building infrastructure, something what we call the network industry, ranging from water, electricity, telecommunications, to make sure that business, they invest in our economy in order for us to basically grow the economy. We've also said that manufacturing should be one of the areas that we should be focusing on, because manufacturing has significantly declined. I mean, if you look at 1994, it was contributing about 20% to the GDP. It has significantly declined now to about 12 to 13%. And one of the key pillars of our focus or discussion document, the strategy itself, is rebuilding of the manufacturing. And for us, is to lay a conducive environment for business to basically get involved by investing into our economy in order to create jobs.
Are there any incentives that you are encouraging the municipalities or even provincial governments to provide potential investors, especially in manufacturing? Because they need factories, right, to operate. And I'm thinking of places like, let's say, Babelegi in Hammanskraal, where the buildings are empty and are not being utilized, yet probably some incentives can be provided to people who would like to operate factories there.
There is a package of incentives that we provide, and in fact, we're focusing on reviving the industrial parks throughout the country in Seshego, Letaba, Tsanin, as well as Babelegi, as you just mentioned. So we are interested, we are focusing on the revival of the industrial park, because those are places and spaces where we can revive the industrial production in many parts of our country.
The other thing is that, the burden of growing the economy seems to be left to Gauteng as a region, as a province. And it appears to me that there's no expectation or demand on the part of other provincial governments to come to the party. Let me use the Eastern Cape, for instance, which has got harbors, it's got other opportunities to grow further, but it appears it's lagging behind, unreasonably so, given the population, size of the population there, and the demand or need for growth, economic growth in that part of the country.
No, government is focusing on the all provinces. An example, in the Eastern Cape, we have Kucha, which it serves as like it's an SEZ, a special economic zone, which gives a number of incentives for businesses to flock in there in order to grow that part of our economy. Recently, Port Elizabeth, Nelson Mandela, there has been automotive investment by the Chinese company there, in which they invested good money for the growth of the automotive sector in that part of our country. In the Limpopo, the government has approved an SEZ as well there around Musina, Makado, to support the mining, coal production. And there is some SEZ that has been approved in Northwest to support the industrial activity. So it's not just, the focus is not just on Gauteng, KZN. There are a number of initiatives that government has basically undertaken. Dube Port, which is also part and parcel of our attempt to use the special economic zones to attract investment. So there are a number of activities that we're undertaking throughout the country, not just in Gauteng, but throughout the country, to make sure that we grow our economy.
Well, the initiatives are impressive, Dr. David Masondo, but we're going to look at the pain points, the big, scary elephants in the room that you've got to deal with to grow or get this economy to grow, and we'll do that in a short while. We'll continue our conversation with the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. David Masondo, after the break. Don't go away.